It's that time of week again where we are bringing you half an hour of science on the radio. That's right, it's Lost in Science. Welcome to the show. My name's Stu, and on the show this week I'm going to be talking about, I reckon, possibly one of the most loved Australian animals. I don't know anyone who dislikes them anyway. Echidnas.
Oh,
I thought we were going to let us guess.
No.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, nobody doesn't like echidnas.
They're just like spiky platypuses. That's all they are.
No, that is not what they are.
No?
They are their own animal.
Okay.
They eat ants. Dig
holes.
holes.
They roll up in a ball.
They roll up in balls.
Get things
They're
caught
pretty
on their spines.
adorable.
Yeah.
Look, they do actually have very important echological roles, and I'm going to be talking to Dr. Christine Cooper from Curtin University about what that role is and how did they find out exactly what echidnas do out in the bush when they're doing their echidna thing.
Because you see echidnas a lot. Like, it's not like the platypus that's very mysterious.
Yeah.
They are,
They womble along the road.
Yeah. Yes.
Although they are quite mysterious, and then they run away, and if you come near them, they just sort of bury themselves and stop doing what they were doing. So it's really hard to kind of tell what they do. But Christine Cooper found out what it is that they do, and she's going to fill us in on what they found about the echidna. Chris.
Well, here on Lost in Science, as you know, we're very fond of our feature series, a series of stories on a theme, We're fond of starting them, at least, starting new ones. I know that we don't necessarily finish them. Like Stu is still working his way through the elements. He's going to get to the end of that very soon, I'm sure.
They keep adding new ones. It's not a closed shop there.
Yeah, but I started one in the solar system, and that's kind of more limited. And
you still haven't finished that one.
Yeah, that's fairly limited. But I'm starting a new one today. I'm going to call "How Do They Work?"
As in magnets, how do they work?
Yeah, I'm not going to do magnets, so
okay.
I'll get onto that sometime. But today it's going to be lasers. How do they work?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, because I'm sure you've all wondered lasers, how do they work?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We use them all the time, but what's actually going on there? So we're gonna find out a bit about lasers.
Just one more piece of evidence that proves that we live in the future is that we use lasers all the time, but nobody really knows how they work. Claire, what have you got for us?
Well, I've actually got an interview today with Anna Sexton, who's a PhD candidate studying at the Monash Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. And she's doing some research into malaria and looking specifically about how the parasites interact with our red blood cells, which is really interesting. And also, a little plug, she is one of the speakers at the Melbourne Science Story Night, the Laboratory, which you have both been part of, Stu and Chris.
We have.
And we are going to be doing a summer series of Laboratory stories this summer. So I'm going to get the lowdown from Anna about her research before we actually put to air her story later on in summer.
Cool. Well, double whammy of Anna coming up in the next couple of months. Stay tuned. Echidnas are probably one of the most iconic Australian animals that you can think of, and I was surprised to find out how little we know about their lifestyle and their habits and their behaviour. So I have got Dr. Christine Cooper from Curtin University in Western Australia on the phone, and we are going to ask her. Well, I'm going to ask her everything I can think of about echidnas. Dr. Cooper, thanks for joining us on Lost in Science.
Thank you for having me.
So, why, after all these years, do we not know much about echidnas? What is it that is so elusive about their behaviour?
I think there's two things. One, it sort of generally reflects our understanding of Australia's fauna in general. So there's lots and lots of things that we don't know a lot about most of our native species. And secondly, echidnas are quite cryptic animals, so they can be quite difficult to work on because one of their strategies is to be quite difficult to find, and they'll burrow down into leaf litter and you don't come across them very often, even though they're over most of the Australian continent.
So they're really good at what they do?
Yes, they are. They're actually one of the species that's doing really quite well post-European settlement. So many of our species have declined, whereas echidnas haven't suffered those same declines in distribution and abundance that we see for a lot of other native mammals.
So they are burrowing animals. I mean, I know I've come across a few, and they sort of tend to sort of get down into the soil pretty quickly and hide themselves really, really well. But that's part of their behaviour, is their burrowing. Why do they burrow?
There's probably three things they do when they're burrowing. So the first thing is they'll dig burrows to sleep in and rest in, and even they'll go into torpor or hibernation in those. They will also burrow into the soil as a predator defence strategy. So they'll burrow down so that their stomach is into the soil and only their spines on their back are exposed. And they also dig to access their food. So they eat ants and termites, and they'll dig down into the soil to access those.
So, do they move much of the soil around? Does that have an effect on the environment around, like the ecology of the bush, even?
Yes, we actually have recently done a study where we were able to put accelerometers onto their back, which let us work out what they were doing. So we could tell whether they were walking or resting or digging. And by looking at how much they were digging, we could determine that they can move large volumes of soil. So if you have 12 echidnas, they can actually dig about the equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool of soil a year. So they're actually having quite significant impacts on the environment by moving this soil, and they can actually contribute to improving ecosystem health by breaking that soil up and moving it around.
So does that influence what kind of plants grow and that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, exactly. So by digging the soil, they prevent soil compaction. They help to incorporate a whole lot of organic matter into the soil. They improve water penetrance into the soil, and so that will really improve plant growth and plant diversity, which in turn impacts on animals as well.
So you said you found this out by attaching accelerometers. Is that what is an accelerometer, and how did you get them to stick onto their spiny backs? Or did you put them on their backs? I mean, where did you put them?
Yeah, we did. We put them on their backs. The accelerometer is a little bit like a Fitbit or the accelerometer in your phone, which picks up movement in 3 planes. And so by putting this onto the echidna's back, we could tell when he was moving around, just like your Fitbit will monitor when you're walking around. So we glued a little aluminium cradle onto their spines, and then we placed the accelerometer and a temperature logger and a transmitter into that cradle, and then let the echidna go. And then we could track it with the transmitter and then take it out, recharge the batteries, and put it back in the little cradle without having to glue and unglue the actual accelerometer to the echidna each time.
And so you said echidnas are all over the country. Where did you base your work?
This work was done in southwest Western Australia in an area known as Dryandra Woodland, which is near Narrogin, which is about 170 kilometres east of Perth.
Okay, and so but can we assume from the data that you've gathered that similar things are happening with echidnas all over the place?
We find that there's some differences between echidnas in different parts of Australia. So there's different subspecies of echidnas, and they slightly vary in their behaviour, their physiology and their diet, but they all have the same basic requirements of food and digging. So they might vary a little bit between different areas, but they are likely to have similar ecosystem impacts across Australia.
So we can extrapolate from your work that they're all doing a good job of tending the garden, so to speak, in all over the country.
Yes, that's right.
And can I just ask, why did you start to study echidnas in the first place? What got you interested in echidnas?
I'm actually really interested in animals that eat ants and termites. So I did my PhD work working on numbats, which are a small marsupial that feeds only on termites. And so a natural extension of that work was then to look at how they compare to echidnas and how they're working. So I've just had a PhD student submit recently who did 5 years of work on echidnas, and we've also done some extra work related to her animals and the sort of techniques we developed through that project. So it's sort of a continuation on interested in animals that eat ants and termites.
And I guess the ants and termites have a huge impact on the environment as well. So it's sort of a big part of the ecology of Australian natural vegetation and ecosystems.
Yes, that's right.
Well, thanks for filling us in on your work on the echidnas. And I was saying to you just before we came on air that I've never met anyone who didn't like echidnas, maybe unless they stood on one by accident. But people seem to be quite interested in echidnas and want to know more about them. And you've sort of opened up a window into their world. So thanks for letting us peek through it with you.
Well, thank you.
That was Dr. Christine Cooper from Curtin University in WA talking to us about her recent work on echidnas.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop.
Lost in Science.
Lasers, how do they work?
Lasers.
Thank you, Dr. Evil there.
First of all, can I just say,
Yeah.
isn't laser an acronym?
It is. Well, that was my first point, Stu. Cool. Well spotted. Laser. The word laser is an acronym. It stands. You know what it stands for?
No, I have known at different times in the past.
It's a good trivia question. It stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. And I thought we'd start by looking at how they work by just unpacking that, which sounds like a lot of jargon, but it basically tells you the gist of what happens. So the idea is that you have like a particle of light, which we call a photon, as you probably know. It causes an atom to emit another photon of the same wavelength and going in the same direction as the first photon. And that is called stimulated emission. And it amplifies the light, as the name suggests, because you end up with two photons where before there was only one.
Yep.
So it doubles at each time this stimulation happens.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, but it's a little more complicated than that, of course, because one of the things you need is the atoms need to have some energy to give away. They're not just going to, have all this stuff.
They haven't got an endless energy supply.
That's right. They're right. So first of all, you have to pump energy into the atoms, which causes the electrons in the atoms to move up into a higher orbit, into what we call an excited state. And the idea is to get more atoms excited than non-excited, and that's called a population inversion, for those of you who are playing at home. So the atom won't stay in this excited state forever. And in fact, this is how it normally gets. Most of our light that we get in most light sources you see is basically atoms in excited states jumping down spontaneously in what's called spontaneous emission. But what you do with the lasers, you hit it with a photon before it does its spontaneous emission thing, and then you can control the light that it emits by causing the electron to jump down in a controlled fashion. And that's basically it. The other thing you normally do with lasers is you put a mirror at each end of it as well to bounce the light backwards and forth, so you get it, amplifying nice and good there.
Do you do that with all lasers? You have to put mirrors there.
Yeah, they have a mirror at each end. Well, one of the mirrors is kind of only partially reflective, so it lets some light out.
Hang on, I'm obviously my brain went first to the laser pointer.
Yeah.
And I just imagine, pointing a laser in your face. So, but there's no mirror associated there.
There is. There are mirrors inside it.
Oh,
inside it. So basically, you have a material that basically has this population inversion, these excited atoms going on. You're pumping energy into that, and then the light bounces back and forth between the two mirrors, amplifying and then shooting out one end.
Oh, right.
So does that mean there's a little hole
in the mirror?
One of those mirrors?
One of the mirrors is actually partially reflecting, so it lets some light out.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the material that's doing this stuff, by the way, so the word laser, as Stu pointed out, was an acronym, but people have kind of gone back and said, well, it sounds like it's a verb, to laze, and so we call that the lasing material that's doing that stuff.
Right.
So it lasers.
Not that lazy, though, is it?
No. And all sorts of things can be made to... Very good, Claire. All sorts of things can be made to laze. The first laser, which was built in 1960 by Theodore Mayman of Bell Laboratories in the United States, it had a ruby rod as its lasing material.
What's a ruby rod?
A guy from Fifth Element. It's a rod, a cylinder of ruby crystal, artificial ruby crystal.
So it has a crystal at its
Yes,
core, basically.
with like a coil of light around it to pump energy into the ruby. It's a pretty cool looking device.
Wow.
So that was the first one. For decades after that first laser was built, lasers were referred to as a solution in search of a problem because everyone could see that they were pretty cool things.
They look really cool.
Yeah, but they didn't know actually what to do with them. So what makes them cool is that the light that's emitted out, it's not only, as I said, it's all in the same wavelength, all going the same direction, but it's also the waves are actually in step with each other. And it's called coherent light. Now, a couple of things regarding this that I just need to clear up. One of the things is that because all the light is traveling in the same direction in a coherent beam, you can't actually see the beam unless it strikes something else, it's reflected off something else. So it could be like a wall or smoke from a smoke machine in a nightclub, perhaps. You may have seen it, Claire. When it is reflected, though, the light from the different from wherever it's hitting, there's, different spots of that will reflect light in different ways. And so you get some of the light bouncing off it will like constructively interfere and get a bit brighter where the waves are in step. Some of it they'll get out of step and they'll destructively interfere. So you get these little bright and dark patches. So this is why the laser shone onto something often is kind of a speckled pattern. It's kind of a distinctive speckled pattern of the laser light. That's because it is so coherent that it does this kind of nice speckly pattern. Another thing to notice is that lasers don't actually go pew pew when they're fired.
They don't make any sound at all.
Do they have wow, wow?
Don't do that either. Some of them do make sounds.
Are you going to get to lightsabers later on, or
no? I'm not going to get to lightsabers. Sorry.
Because for some reason they're not lasers. Well, they can't be lasers because they stop.
Yeah, it's
They sort of shoot out and then stop. That's obviously not a laser.
That is kind of a problem, yeah.
It goes in one direction.
When I was at uni, I remember we talked about this. There was no solution to the wave equations, no one that would give you a beam that would just stop somewhere. So yeah, a bit of a problem.
That's a problem.
Yes.
Thanks for clearing that up, though.
No worries. But yeah, so lasers, they're very special. We have found a lot of uses, of course, in the intervening decades now. As you said, they're used for pointing at things as a laser pointer. Very important uses.
Academics worldwide are grateful.
Yep, they're used for things like laser hair removal. I saw a sign today. It does that. Mm-hmm. Also, of course, in your disk drives for both reading and burning data. They're used in supermarket checkouts, for things like in factories to cut things out, all this kind of stuff. Now,
laser cutters, of course.
Yeah. Now, most of these lasers, not the big cutting ones, industrial ones, but most of the other lasers they're semiconductor lasers. They're laser diodes, and these are really tiny. So what they've got a diode basically, which is kind of a junction between two semiconductors. There's one side has too many electrons, the other side has too few electrons, and so electrons move from one side to the other, and then a current conducts. But if you put a lot of energy into it, then the electrons will give off light as they're doing this, and then you have mirrors on each side of it, and you bounce the light backwards and forwards just like a normal laser. But it's only tiny and will fit in your pocket or inside your disk drive, as the case may be. Now, they're pretty small, but they can actually get quite powerful. The ones used for burning DVDs can get quite powerful. They get to about 250 milliwatts of power. Doesn't sound a lot, I know, but it is.
Doesn't sound like a lot.
Well, it can burn little holes in the thing.
Yeah.
It's burning the material in the disc.
That's right. That's right.
So it's actually making holes in that material. So it's, you wouldn't want to point it at your skin.
No,
extensively or anything like that.
The whatchamacallit, laser pointers, they're usually a lot weaker though. They're like 1 milliwatt is a usual typical laser pointer. Still don't point them in your eye.
What about those laser pointers that astronomers use to point at stars when they're giving educational talks?
No, how is it pointing at the star?
They're obviously not pointing right at the stars, but they go up really far.
You see a little spot of light in the sky?
No,
there could be some sort of mist there.
They must be reflecting off water vapor or something.
They're very powerful.
Yes.
Well, can be anyway.
Yes, yeah. Well, we mentioned the other uses like the industrial lasers for cutting things. They often use carbon dioxide gas in their lasing material, and they get to about 3 kilowatts. So they're pretty powerful.
Very powerful.
However, you're probably wondering what's the most powerful laser.
Was that the one that Goldfinger was using on the board that he had James Bond tied to in the film Goldfinger? Was that a...
That would have been
there
one of
was
those carbon
about to
dioxide
give
lasers,
you-
I think,
that was a
But that's not
carbon
the most
dioxide.
powerful laser. The most
Not the
powerful
most
laser
powerful.
I've been able to find is called the Laser for Fast Ignition Experiment, or LFEX. It's from Japan. It's a neodymium doped glass laser. It's
Sounds dope.
Yep. It's 100 meters long. It produces pulses of 2 petawatts of power. That is 2,000 trillion watts of power.
So
Wow.
that's quite a bit more than 1.21 gigawatts.
It
if
is,
anyone
that is
knows how
quite
much
big,
that
it
is.
Look, it's used to try and ignite nuclear fusion. So basically, it's trying to replicate the conditions at the heart of a star. Now, it sounds powerful, and they do say the team that produced it claim that the pulses, the power is about 1,000 times the world's energy consumption, but it only lasts about 1 trillionth of a second. So the amount of actual energy used is only a couple of hundred joules, which is, they reckon, it's about as much as a microwave oven would use in 2 seconds.
What are they using it for?
To try and replicate the conditions at the heart of a star to ignite nuclear fusion.
So they're basically doing fusion experiments.
They
Right.
are. Now, it cannot, I know you jumped to these conclusions, it cannot be used as a death ray, at least not on Earth. It is because it's too powerful to be used as a death ray. This is the kind of the paradox here. So it produces so much energy that it ionizes the air on contact. And ionized gas is like opaque to light. So, yeah, it can't get through the atmosphere. It has to be used in a vacuum. So, yeah, you probably could use it in space, I guess.
Can you use it in space
So you
then?
could actually attach it to something.
You could.
like
Except-
a big round satellite, say,
Yep.
and turn it into some kind of, I don't know, Death Star.
Yeah, although it...
Or a
it-
death planet.
Okay, yeah, but when we look at the maths, it uses only a couple of hundred joules, we said. Now, it's been calculated the Death Star would have needed to use about 2.2 by 10 to the power of 32 joules to destroy a planet. So we're about 30 orders of magnitude off that needed to destroy a planet.
Phew.
Yeah.
Lucky.
So, yeah, there we go. Lasers, they're not the Death Star, but in fact, they are very useful, and that's how they work.
My guest today is Anna Sexton, who's a PhD candidate studying with the Monash Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. She's studying malaria and how parasites interact with our red blood cells. Anna, welcome to Lost in Science.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Can we start just, if you could tell us a little bit about the state of disease malaria in the world at the moment?
Yeah, so malaria is a pretty devastating disease for the developing world. Last year, it caused 200 million cases and almost 500,000 people died from malaria last year alone. We've made quite a lot of progress in the last 15 years. So it's estimated that approximately 600 million cases of malaria have been averted because of a lot of interventions, which
Wow.
is, yeah, it's a lot. So interventions such as insecticide-treated bed nets, spraying of walls of people in malaria endemic regions, and also some really handy drugs that have been developed recently.
So it sounds like the word is getting out and the technologies are catching up, but it's still a huge issue.
Yeah.
500,000 people in every year is not a small number.
No, it's definitely still a global health burden. And also adding to the devastating effects of the disease is that a lot of our current drugs are starting to fail. So there's a real push in the research community to try and develop new drugs all of the time because the parasite's quite tricky. As soon as we bring in a new drug, it develops resistance.
Like quinine, right? That used to be able to treat malaria, did it, back in the day?
Yeah, quinine was probably one of the first treatments for malaria, and then we sort of optimized that drug to get chloroquine. and that had a lot less side effects, and it was actually really cheap and effective. And then it totally failed because the malaria parasite, it developed resistance against chloroquine. So yeah, it has happened time and time again. Every time we bring in a new drug, we always are getting resistance.
Tricky little bugger.
Yeah, they're very smart.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your research.
Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in the molecular mechanisms that sort of underpin the symptoms of malaria. So all the tiny little invisible things that are going on in a malaria patient that we're otherwise not aware of, but that sort of present as different symptoms. So I'm particularly interested in anemia, so the symptom of anemia, where malaria patients lose heaps of red blood cells. So that's partly accounted for because the malaria parasite actually gets into red blood cells, replicates, builds up its numbers, and then bursts out, destroying the red blood cell. That happens again and again. Like, for example, in a drop of blood, you could have 250,000 parasites just in that single drop. So
oh my goodness,
it's a huge burden on your red blood cells. But actually, even on top of that, your healthy red blood cells also begin to die, which it's really serious for the malaria patient and is one of the main causes of death. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it's very important to address that issue.
Yeah, to understand how it happens, because we don't really have that much information available about the process. And perhaps if we know more, we can intervene and actually treat malaria for the symptom rather than the parasite to help improve patient outcome.
So can you tell us a little bit about the experiments that you have been doing?
Yeah, so I guess to investigate anemia, I'm studying the interaction that malaria parasites have with uninfected healthy red blood cells. And so cells don't really need to touch to actually communicate. They can send out chemicals to have sort of a chemical conversation with one another.
Like an echo or something like that.
Yeah, so just little chemicals that are to go out into the surroundings, and other little cells pick them up, and they actually can change those cells. So I'm studying that process, and so I sort of eavesdrop on the malaria parasites and the healthy red blood cells and see what's going on there. And after I let that chemical conversation occur, I then study what changes or what has changed in the red blood cells after they've been exposed to malaria secretions.
And what have you found so far?
So I have found that they do indeed change. Mm-hmm. One of the important findings that I've found is that the process that the red blood cells use to make energy actually changes. It doesn't work as well. So that has quite a lot of implication for the cells.
Huge
The cell needs energy.
Yeah.
So of course now I have to see whether that has clinical relevance. Does that actually explain why red blood cells are destroyed in malaria patients? So that's going to take a lot more work. So now I found out what changes. I have a lot more questions about why it changes, etc.
And I know it isn't really like a scientist to say what you are expecting to find. Can you give us a clue, though, as to what you think you'll find?
Yeah, because of these changes to the energy making process, I see a particular chemical accumulating. It's called lactic acid, and it's
lactic acid.
Yeah, the chemical that makes your muscles sore.
Yeah, after you play sport and you haven't played it for months.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so that is a chemical that's accumulating in the red blood cells, and that, as the name suggests, it's an acid, so it could acidify the cells. And I sort of hypothesized that acidification causes the cell to swell.
Oh.
And that compromises its structural integrity, and that might actually lead to clearance. When the red blood cell circulates to the spleen can go, hey, you're not normal. I'll take you away. Yeah. So I have a lot more work to do to confirm that, but that's my current working hypothesis.
And so say that hypothesis is true. What would be the future implications?
I guess you could try and interfere with the lactic acid aspect. Not too sure how to go about that. I haven't thought that far, because first you always want to prove your hypothesis. But if you could interfere with the lactic acid buildups in some way, it could stop the cells from swelling and losing their structural integrity.
Is your research, is it part of a bigger project that's happening at Monash, or?
It's not. It's a very individual project just for me, but I use very similar techniques that my colleagues use. So our lab is very technique-based. And so, yeah, I share a lot of experiments in common, but we all are asking different questions.
Are there many other people, researchers in Australia, who are working on malaria?
Yeah, it's a huge research hub for malaria scientists in Melbourne. So there's a lot of support in other universities and in other institutes, and we are often coming together and sharing results. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Good to know there's some collaboration happening there.
Absolutely.
Now, you also recently presented a very thrilling talk at Melbourne Science Story Night, the Laborastory, as some of our listeners might know Laborastory. Can you give us a bit of a synopsis about your talk, because it was so amazing?
Thank you.
It was fantastic.
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a story about the malaria parasite, a sexually transmitted disease, and a psychiatrist.
There are three things that I never thought would have been put in the same sentence together.
Exactly.
That's a really good segue to let our listeners know that Lost in Science will be playing the Laborastories over summer as part of our special summer series. So yeah, please make sure you listen out for Anna's brilliant story.
Thank you.
I mean, it sort of sounds like a riddle. The parasite, the psychologist, and the sexually transmitted disease.
That's right. Like to keep people guessing.
Fantastic. Anna, thanks so much for coming in today, and the best of luck with your future research. I'm really looking forward to hearing how your hypothesis goes. And yeah, please come in and chat to us more when you do more research.
I would love that. Thanks for having me.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of Lost in Science. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you want to talk to us, talk back to us, you can get in touch. We have a Gmail account, lostinsci@gmail. You can also find us on Twitter and on the Facebook. And if that's not enough Lost in Science for you, you can always tune in again next week, where the team will once again get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.